We've got a John Deere X540 we're looking at. Customer brought it in and said that it'd run for about 15 or 20 minutes and cut out on them. They said it was just serviced, I think in January or February by the local dealer. So it's been used a solid 7-8 months. When we got it in, the thing ran perfect. We loaded it up on the trailer, it was fine. We got it onto the table here, and I let it run for maybe 15 minutes or so. And now, it won't stay running without me keeping the choke on, as you see there. Now this is a John Deere FD731 engine. Real good engine they have here. Very good quality. I'm going to take this hood off real quick and we're going to dive a little bit deeper. As you're listening to it, I mean, it sounds like a fuel delivery issue. Basically like it's not getting fuel for some reason. That hood just has a clip that pulls apart on the back side. And then the hood tips a little bit closed and pulls straight up and off, for those of you that don't know. Looks like on this we got a fuel pump on the side of the engine. This is pulling from this line that goes to the back of the tank, pulls all the way to the front. Now this thing does have plenty of fuel in it. It seemed a little bit low. The gas didn't seem real bad, but we're going to check it. We're going to take off this cowling here. Looks like just an 8mm bolt holding it on. And then it just pulls to the side and out and around. It's just to keep all grass and dirt and debris and stuff away from everything. Now we've got good access to the fuel line. Now this fuel line looks pretty bad just from the outside. I'm going to take, and again, usually I'll grab and I'll twist before I try to take them off. Just keeps you from ripping the fuel line a lot of times. Got a jar here to catch some of this in. Got some pieces of black already right there inside the, and that's just from the inside of the fuel line, but if that's deteriorating, it's probably built up just about everywhere. I'm going to put a fuel line on here, turn it over a couple times and see what kind of fuel flow we're getting, and check the fuel a little bit more thoroughly. So we're getting a good fuel flow. Fuel doesn't look cloudy or anything like that whatsoever. It looks really clear. Seems to be a pretty good quality fuel. They said they use ethanol free that we get from a local station here in town. But the question is, if we're getting good fuel at the fuel pump here, that goes directly to the carburetor, which tells us we have a carburetor issue at this point. That or the fuel being bad. Now, if you were noticing a line or anything at the bottom where there could be some moisture or something gathering, you know, and some bad fuel, you'd want to go ahead and drain this whole tank and replace it with some good stuff if you didn't know the origin. In this case, I do believe that they are using ethanol free. This stuff is pretty clear. A lot of the stuff you get that's regular ethanol blended pump fuel, it'll be extremely yellow. If you're not getting fuel flow to the fuel pump here, there's a couple different reasons that can happen. Number one, this fuel line, where it goes to the back of the tank, a lot of times where it goes into the tank at the pickup, which is essentially where it drops into the tank at, what'll happen is a lot of the debris, as it tries to come around that corner, it'll build up in that pickup tube, and it'll allow some flow, but not a fast enough flow to keep it running. That's one of the most common causes of this issue that I see. It could also be a plugged fuel filter. We don't see that as much, but restricted fuel flow can happen anywhere. These lines here look different than this one for some reason. I'm not sure if this line came with the original tractor and this one was already on the engine when the engine was shipped for it to be installed, but they look like two completely different lines, and that may be the reason. This one looks pretty well deteriorating, and the other one looks pretty well good. Now, if that line is completely free at this point and you're not getting anything out of your fuel pump, you know that either the fuel pump's bad or you have an issue with the compression of the cylinder. And actually on this one, the compression of the cylinder is not going to matter because it actually runs off the crankcase pressure directly into the crankcase. A lot of them will run off one of the valves, and if one valve isn't working, it can happen as to where your fuel pump won't pump. But in this case, it runs directly off the crankcase breather. As long as your engine is turning over, you should be getting a pressure there. We're going to take a look at the solenoid next and basically go further towards the carb. Now we can test this a little further if you're not sure that this may be your issue. You can make sure that it stays running without the choke on, or with the choke on with a little bit of carb cleaner, just to make sure that it is a fuel delivery related issue. Quite a bit of dust up in here. One thing I love about these engines is they're just so open. Everything's right here. Pretty nice design, in my opinion. I don't mind doing heads or anything else on them because it's just a better experience than most. We're going to check this solenoid real quick. Now this right here is your after fire solenoid. What it does is it shuts off the fuel supply. There's a little needle that sticks straight in and it shuts off the fuel supply when the key's off, just to make sure that you don't get a backfire while your engine's shutting down. But as I'm turning this, you can hear that click. You can actually hear the solenoid click, and you can feel it if you're touching it. Now, if you're not hearing or seeing that, feeling that, you can test the voltage coming to the wire here back to ground, and you should be getting 12 plus volts. If you're not, you know you have an issue with the wiring, the switch, something up front electronically that's shutting off fuel or not allowing your unit to get fuel. At this point, we're getting plenty of fuel here. The solenoid is working, which tells us we have further a carburetor problem. What we were thinking, we're going to go ahead and pull this off. And there's just two 10mm bolts and two 10mm nuts. And then you want to take the after fire solenoid off. And then the whole cover. Oh, I forgot about this breather over here. There's a little clip and a breather on this side. Pull straight out. And then it'll pull straight off. Now there are some other things attached here, but you can usually just work those right past. Yep. To get it off of there. It's a interesting metal plate gasket. I don't know that I've ever seen one quite like that on these. This one's a little bit different than some of them. Now we're going to take the fuel line clamp off. If I can find my... There. Fuel line clamp off. Fuel line will come off next. Just turn, twist, and then pull it off. And we are going to have to take this other... Oh, I'm sorry, that was the one for the air cleaner cover, but fuel line, same thing. Just remember when you put them back on, your fuel line is the one to the left, and your breather goes on the one to the right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to replace all this line, though. It's cracked real bad. I mean, it's just in horrible shape. I'm going to try to get them to replace the stuff going all the way to the back also. That's not quite as necessary because there is a fuel filter past that line, as long as it's not collapsing on itself, which I don't think it is in this case. Seems like we're getting plenty of fuel supply, and we can do that. There's just a little clip on these as I'm doing them. I took that one off a little too hastily here, without really showing what was going on. So this on the side, see if I can get us a little bit better picture here. So on the side, as we're taking it off, this sits up at the top, just on this little tab here, and it sits in here and it latches in. So what you've got to do is you've got to just pull this piece this way to get that latch off of there, and then you get your spring off and it's free. So it can kind of go down to the side. Now on the other side here, got a similar contraption, just your little keeper. You're gonna flip it, push it back, and this pulls straight out. That's your choke. It is off at that point. The whole carburetor is free, and it is ready to get inspected. Now this plate did come off with it. You want to pay attention to which way that goes back on. What I like to do sometimes is just go ahead and mark the top. You mark it at the carburetor, a couple lines, and then at the block, a single line, which will tell you exactly where these go. That goes to there, this goes to here. So if this pulls off or comes apart, which we'll take it apart, and flies apart like that, you're gonna want to know where it goes back to. It does look like there is a little notch on the one side, but makes it nice and easy for you anyway. Let's get this thing pulled apart, figure out what's going on. Usually I like to blow all this dirt off first, just so you don't introduce anything more into the carburetor. When you're opening it up. Now these are kind of difficult to get out a lot of times. On some of the other makes and stuff like that, we use a pair of pliers in there to grab a hold of them, but on this one it makes it a lot more difficult to do that, just with the way that it's set up. Not a whole lot of room to get to those corners. So I mean, this thing's pretty stinking clean on the inside. That popped right up off out of there. I'm not really seeing a whole lot of issues with this thing here. Everything is looking good. Surely it's not just the flow from that one to the other one. Everything is looking real good in this case. We are going to take these, those are your jets, straight through there, and your emulsion tubes are set up a little bit different. I think that might be the pilot jet. I'm not sure on these. They're set up a lot different than your normal carbs, but we're going to throw this in the cleaner for a little while, let it clean up, and I'm going to go ahead and get some gaskets ordered. I'm going to get this bottom gasket ordered, and then the two for the intake and the one for the intake on the air cleaner side. And once we get this all cleaned up, we'll get it put back together and figure out what's going on. I'm not 100% sure that that's the issue, but definitely a fuel delivery issue. But if it's delivering good fuel to the carburetor and the carburetor is not supplying it, we've either got an intermittent solenoid or we've got, you know, something of that nature. But it seemed to work perfectly fine as we were just going through everything. Looks like our carburetor is ready to go. Now when I put this in here, I usually like to keep it so the solenoid stays up out of the water. You can take it off first if you'd like. That's no problem at all. It's just usually if you get the water level up to that solenoid, it kind of cleans the inside of the solenoid there, where we're going to need to clean as we take the solenoid off anyway. Now again, the carburetor didn't look too horrible. Could be something stuck at the inlet for the flow or in one of the jets. And one of the jets isn't very likely since the mower shuts down, he says. We've got a couple gaskets for the intake. That's 11061-2128. We've also got your other intake gasket. That's on the air cleaner side, 11061-2075. Bowl gasket 11061-2090. And then we got the crush washer for the solenoid when we take it off. That's a 92022-2231. Should be all we need to get this thing back up and going. Throw these to the side. Get all this taken out. That's quite a bit of stuff in there. I wonder if the fuel line was deteriorating and we were getting something, if we had like some little pieces of rubber or something like that on the other side of this inlet, that would cause this issue. Ooh. Oh, that was just water. I thought something good flew out of it. Yeah, I didn't really see anything big fly out of it at all. It's got some pretty nasty stuff on it. It was pretty nasty still, looks like. Try to get all that cleaned off real well. The cleaner you get it, the better it's gonna be. You know, you don't want any of this stuff inside your engine, but you know, obviously outside the carb, all that stuff that you can't get to, you can leave it. Now we use a gum out carb cleaner to get this stuff all cleaned up as we're getting the jets and stuff clean. We're gonna go ahead and remove the pilot jets here. Now, as you remove these, you wanna push hard and turn, and you want a screwdriver that's gonna be nice and big enough to get in there and get that jet out solid. Because if you don't get it, something that gets kind of both sides of the slot, you're gonna strip that out and that's gonna be stuck in there. Now that one doesn't look too bad. Well, I don't know. It's a pretty tiny hole down through there. Kind of hard to see. We'll get some tools to clean that up here in just a second. I'm gonna take the pilot jets out first and then we'll do the main jets at the bottom, and we'll remove the solenoid to check it. Yeah, so we'll get all that cleaned down through there, and then we'll check these holes straight through, make sure they're good. All of this up through, and we blew everything else out pretty good. And blow this out again here. I'm sure the air compressor is going to want to kick on here shortly. Gasket just comes straight out. I'm going to use some pieces of this brush here to clean all of this stuff. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pair of needle nose pliers. I'm just going to pull a loom out. Loom out here. Looks like we got somebody dropping something off way before ours out there, it sounds like. And we're just going to poke down through there, get everything cleaned out. And we'll clean this all up with carb cleaner before we put it back together. Probably get a nice clean towel here in a second. You don't want to work with all this dirt around. You got all these tiny little pieces from when I blew that carburetor off. Get some of that stuff up in there and you're going to run into issues. Now pay attention to which one of these goes where. Put them back in the same side. They are both the same size though. I just always like to differentiate the two. All right. Go ahead and spray our float off. And get our needle all cleaned up. Now you want to make sure that tip doesn't have any damage or anything to it. If it does, you will want to replace it and make sure the rubber's good. I think I talked about this before, but... And then down here, yeah, just make sure that's all free and cleaned up, especially along these edges. Along those edges is a lot of times where that sticks. I always like to run my fingernail along it. If you don't feel anything, there's probably nothing there. Now that just goes straight back in here. And then it goes down in. Sits like that, and then the pin goes back into it. Like such. Right. Now that is all good. I want to make sure it goes this way also. Spray that all off real well. Go ahead and use this to, all I'm trying to do is get down through these holes a little bit, make sure they go straight through. And then you can double check. They look really clean, but you can double check by poking the, you can also use like torch tip cleaners if you'd like. Like for this, that works a little bit better because they're about the same size. Would probably be a little bit easier to clean these out without the float in here. So let's do that real quick. Take the float back out. Again, make sure the round part is to the left of the inlet side if it's like this, as opposed to backwards. Not sure exactly how much difference it would make, but that's definitely the way that I took it out. Okay. I'm gonna grab, oh, there's some right here. I'm gonna say normally we have torch tip cleaners and then just snip the tips off of them, of course. Just have nice ridges on them to clean things out. I'm gonna try this second to smallest one. Yeah, so just work those through. And again, everything seemed clean. You can see light straight through them and they're perfect circle, then you're fine. I already blew them out real well. Go through all those holes. Backside might be better. I had a little too much caffeine today. Well, this morning. Still pretty early. Oh, it's 7 now. Not too bad. Okay. Maybe not enough caffeine. Okay. Yeah, there's not really much in there that I'm seeing coming out at all. Spray that back off again. Just better to be safe than sorry. Clean it up real well. Okay. Float, needle, pin, all back in. Ready to go. Now we're going to get our main jet down at the bottom. In here. So it's all the way down in here. These are going to be your main jets. Now again, push and turn. Other side. Now again, you want to make sure you're using the right screwdriver for this. If you're not using something that's got a good tip to it, it's not going to work well. And then we're going to go ahead and take the solenoid off. Looks like it's right about a 3/4. Let's see. And all I did is kind of held that flat against, just to give me a little leverage. Pull it off. Now we're looking really clean there. We're going to spray all down in here and work that kind of through. If there's any gunk along this, you're going to want to clean that all off to make sure it doesn't stick. And then down through here. So that's what feeds the entire engine right here. It's just one little hole. Now if that's plugged up, actually, it actually looks like there's a piece of black right down in there in the hole. It looks like it's all plugged up right there. Not sure if you can see that down in there, but I'll try to blow this out real good. See if I can, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and open this screw on the bottom also. Just blow that out, make sure. Now again, go through these jets just like we did the others. I love wire looms. I just think they work great for this. Just kind of pushing it through. That's clear as can be. So is that one not dirty at all? I wonder if it was just that tiny little piece down in that inlet shutting off the whole fuel supply just randomly. It's almost what it seems like here. Lost track of which one went where, but again, they are the same. I just normally like to put them back in the same spot that you removed them from. Just good habit on anything mechanical. Things go back where they came from. Guess I could review the video and see, but not that big of a deal. All right. Compressor off. Our new crush washer. Go ahead and put that in. And again, all that thing does is the little needle in here just comes back as soon as the voltage is applied. And all it does is that allows fuel through and in, through that tiny little hole we just cleaned out where there was some stuff shoved up in. It's back tightened down. Okay. Put this back in. Perfect. And then it all just goes back together. There's two tabs here that line up. Got your 4 screws. Get these all tightened down, and then we're basically at the home stretch here now. On these gaskets, you always want to make sure those are replaced, because if there is an air leak, that's going to cause your mower to run horribly. Now this here, there's nothing wrong with this gasket. It is kind of hard though. All I'm going to do is I'm going to double this up. Now if there was something wrong with this gasket, you want to replace it. There's no doubt about that. You will have a problem if there's an issue with this gasket and you don't replace it. This one here is still 100% flat. I'm just going to double it up so it seals this flat surface right back to the other side of the plastic. Now again, we did mark these, 2 for this side and 1 for the other. Again, make sure the other side also is nice and clean. This kind of finishes up the carb at this point. Go ahead and go to reinstalling. We did go ahead and replace the fuel line, the fuel filter, and the fuel pump off camera. Fuel line was in real horrible shape. It's just really brittle, not in good shape whatsoever. You can see kind of how the inside's deteriorating on it. And the other one here, it's kind of the same way. Now when this inside layer, you can see there's kind of a place where it separates. This inside liner, when it starts to separate, it'll actually close in on itself sometimes and cause an issue like this. Now we didn't replace the fuel line all the way back. We only replaced it from the fuel filter forward along with the fuel pump. Now the reason I did the fuel pump is because we didn't really know what the cause of the issue was when we first started this. I figured at this point we'd know we had good fuel supply. We'd know that the fuel pump wasn't clogged up or anything. This thing's got a bunch of dust and stuff over its little breather. I don't know how old it is or anything like that. So it's a cheap thing that could be an easy fix if the fuel pump's going bad. Normally they're bad or they're good, but that'll take care of the entire fuel system forward. Now, if we still have issues with a fuel supply at this point or something like that, we know this whole supply is brand new, it's clean, and the fuel is good. At that point, if we're still having an issue, we're going to follow the fuel line back and see if we have something plugged up in the tank, see if we have an issue with the fuel line deteriorating like I just explained, because that's really all you have left here. We've already inspected the carburetor, we know it's in good shape, and we've taken a look at pretty much everything else at this point. Let's get this carb put back on and test this thing out, see if we've got our problem solved. Getting the one gasket on the back. All right. And then we did put those scratches in the top to denote where they go. So your tabs go just like such. And make sure both sides of that are clean again. Both the plastic and the metal. We're going to have this one go on. Carburetor here. Alright, get in there. There you go. And then we're going to pull that linkage from the other side. Now with it, it's kind of in the way, but pulling it back up. And then we're going to put our little spring on. Put our linkage on here. Now it is a little bit easier to pull that linkage down and to it if you've got your throttle turned to low. Makes it a little easier if you're having difficulties with it. And then on the other side, kind of the same thing. This just pushes straight in and then this piece comes down and locks into it. I know we probably don't have the best view on that side. Okay. Really getting there now. Pretty close. Got our front gasket. A really weird one. Okay, good. And then remember the fuel line goes to the left. Now that's if I'm standing at this side, which means the front. And we've got the breather line. It goes underneath and over to. It's the one on the right. I don't want to go up on there so easily, that clamp doesn't. There we go. Got it now. Throw this back on. Again, you can take all these off if you want to make it a little bit easier for you to get that stuff on, but either way you want to do it. Got to get this breather hooked up on the left. Get our bolts and our nuts in. And we'll get everything tightened back up. Should be ready to go. Now you do want to move these linkages. You know, make sure everything's working. If you take your throttle and move it down, it should spring okay and everything should work. If it's not, you know you have something wrong. On this one, you should be able to see it if you choke it. Everything's free. Use a 10mm. Get ready to button this thing up. That's all set. Plug our solenoid back in. And right now, what I'm going to do is just open the door after I get this thing fired up. And we're going to let it run for about half an hour or however long it takes and see if we can't get it to shut off right here on the table. Now, if you're still having issues at this point, we're right over the right-hand tire. This is where the fuel line comes from the front and goes into the top of the tank. When it goes into the tank, it comes this way and then drops straight down in. That's that elbow for the intake I was talking about. And then it goes down into the tank and it pulls from there and goes through. If you've got a bunch of debris or something in there, that'll cause kind of the same issue. This thing ran fine again, so we're not going to replace any of this line or worry about it collapsing on itself or any debris or anything in the line at this point. Everything seems good and tests good. We saw we didn't really have a fuel restriction before, even though that's what it seemed like before we pulled the carb. We knew it was a carb issue, but here, if you're still having an issue, check that pickup. That's probably what you have going on. Now we're going to go ahead and send this back to the customer after we get it all cleaned up. We're going to address obviously the wiring to the deck where it's just kind of holding it up in the front. Not sure what's going on with that or if they want that taken care of. Definitely isn't right. Check anywhere where there's a change in direction or there's a restriction or, you know, fuel line and stuff like that. We didn't see a whole lot of black in the fuel filter when we took the old fuel filter off, which would tell us that the line going to the back of the tractor probably isn't deteriorating. Could have been some of this stuff coming up to the carburetor that just a couple pieces is all it takes to flake off, and those pieces get in where you saw. That'll cause it to happen real quick, and it's just a tiny piece of debris. It's kind of crazy that happens, but that can happen anywhere. Now, I don't like just throwing parts at things. I know I just kind of threw this fuel pump at it. For how much a fuel pump costs, it was kind of silly not to, and that's the whole system from the fuel filter forward. It's all taken care of now. This thing's ready to go back as soon as we address kind of some of the other issues that they've got going on. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.